Today's anime review, we get to cover another 80s anime movie. This time it's basically a anime war drama film. For today's anime review is Barefoot Gen. Barefoot Gen is a 1983 Japanese anime war drama film loosely based on the Japanese manga series of the same name by Kenji Nakazawa. Directed by Mori Masaki and starring Issei Miyazaki, Masaki Koda, and Tatsuya Joe, it depicts World War II in Japan from the child's point of view, revolving around the events surrounding the bombing of Hiroshima, which is probably part of the Pacific War in World War II, which is over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which happened on the date between April 6th and August 9th, 1945, of how this anime depicted, particularly in Barefoot Gen as well, for this point of view. And the main character's first-hand experience of the bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which was probably during World War II as well. Barefoot Gen was dubbed by Streamline Pictures in 1995, despite the fact that it was released in the United States on June 13th, 1992, and July 3rd, 1992 at San Jose, California as well. So let's review Barefoot Gen. Let's begin. Gen Nakaoka and his family live in Hiroshima during the final days of World War II. The family struggles through food shortages and constant air raid warnings. Jen's mother, Kimi, is pregnant and suffering from malnutrition, and his sister, Eiko, helps Kimi in her housework. Jen and his brother, Shinji, help their father, Daikichi, in the family's wheat field and try to find food for Kimi. Daikichi and Kimi realize the war is not going well, though they wonder why Hiroshima has been spared from the air raids which devastated over Japanese cities. On August 6, 1945, Jen and a friend arrive at school just as a lone B-29 aircraft flies overhead. The Enola Gay releases a bomb which devastates the city. Jen's friend is killed in the blast, while he is buried under the rubble by the resulting of the shockwave. Jen finds Kimi in the ruined city, and they try to rescue their family, who are buried alive under their burning collapsed house. However, they are unsuccessful, and Daikichi urges his son to take care of Kimi and the baby. Daikichi, Eiko, and Shinji burn to death as Jen and his mother watch helplessly, which is probably not in a good way. Kimi briefly suffers a mental breakdown, commenting that her family is burning like a campfire. With the help from her neighbor, the two find a safe location where Kimi goes into labor. Kimi gives birth to a baby girl, Tomoko. Black rain soon falls on the ruined city as the result of the bomb that sent radioactive material and debris into the atmosphere, which is probably what's happening during the final days of World War II. Jen spends the next few days searching for food, and for his family, he discovers that soldiers are distributing rice, but arrives to find them collecting corpses before burning them in mass graves. He meets a soldier who is shivering from being cold, despite the heat, and he defecates and vomits blood. Jen takes him to a makeshift hospital, where the doctor informs Jen that the soldier has died. The doctor has no clue about what caused the soldier's death as well. He finds a ration storehouse containing rice, much of which has already been seared by the blast. He finds a few bags of intact rice and takes them to his mother to eat along with some fresh vegetables. Kimi points out a few bald spots on her son's head, who recollects the memory of the soldier dying from the unknown illness. In a voiceover, the narrator mentions that the U.S. government gave Japan an ultimatum: surrender or another bomb will be dropped. When Japan refuses to surrender, the Fat Man bomb detonates on the city of Nagasaki, suffering the outcome as Hiroshima. On August 16th, Jen and Kimi dig up the remains of their family members from their former home. They learn from a nearby family that Japan has surrendered to the Allies, ending the war. Their prayers of peace came too late. They later take a refuge in a makeshift shack where they try to live on what little rice they have. A small boy named Ryuta tries to steal their rice, but Jen catches him and is shocked at Ryuta's resemblance to Shinji, which is basically Jen's brother who in the past as well. By this time, Jen and Kimi take Ryuta after learning that Ryuta was orphaned by the bomb, which is probably during the final days of World War II. You guessed it. The next day, Jen and Ryuta look for food as Tomoko is suffering from malnutrition. A man gives them a job tending to help his ill-tempered brother Seiji, another bomb survivor, for 10 yen a day, but the boys grow tired of the mistreatment, slap Seiji several times, and quit. Seiji begs them to come back, explaining to them that he is grateful that the boys treated him like more than a rotting corpse. Gen tells Ryota to tell his mother where they are, and he spends the night with a man, which inspires him to paint once again. The man's brother pays them 100 yen, and the boys head out to find milk for Tomoko. When they return home, they find that Tomoko has already died, which is probably not in a good way, because that's how the emotional intense happens, what you expect to see, what is going on in the anime movie Barefoot Gen. Above of all this, a few weeks later, Jen and Ryota see wheat beginning to grow despite having heard that grass would not grow, which is not a good way. With renewed optimism, Jen and his mother and Ryota set a paper boat lantern down the river. By this time, then they watch and pray as the boat gently sails into the sunset, as it noticed, as it will. And that's my serious plot about the anime movie Barefoot Gen. Come to think of this, Barefoot Gen was released in Japan on July 21st, 1983, where it was distributed by Herald Enterprises, and it was released in the United States on June 13th, 1992, and it was dubbed by Streamline Pictures in 1995. Yep. The critical reception of the film review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes reported a 75% approval rating based on 8 reviews with an average rating of 7.25 out of 10. The Barefoot Gen anime made Time Magazine's list of top 5 anime DVDs. I noticed there is a sequel to Barefoot Gen called Barefoot Gen 2, which particularly this anime movie takes place 3 years after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, which is probably during the final days of World War II as well. I mean, this is your typical anime movie that depicts in a setting during the final days of World War II, during the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing back in 1945, like August 6th and August 9th, which is probably during the final days of World War II. And yes, this is your typical anime war drama movie as well. Yeah, because this is your and the English dubs on here is basically dubbed by Streamline Pictures on it. And yes, it did feature Dan Warren, Michael McConaughey, Barbara Goodson, Wendy Lee, Kirk Thornton, many of the actors that appeared in particularly the English dub for the movie for the anime movie Barefoot Gen, which is probably in the Streamline Pictures English dub as well. But in the original Japanese dub, for the voices, the U.S. air pilots in Barefoot Gen in the Japanese dub, you can hear they're basically voiced by English voice actors in the Japanese dub, because the characters in Barefoot Gen were dubbed by the Japanese voice actors. And yeah, because come to think of it, because this is something of how, which is long before, way more emotional, because the theme deals with the historical and the final days of World War II, especially for an anime movie like Barefoot Gen, technically as well, because this takes place in the setting of World War II, especially the final days of World War II, especially the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing in Japan, particularly, which is particularly depicted in the final days of World War II, especially in a anime war drama film like Barefoot Gen, which is another kind of a technical thing, because I was very well known about this, particularly about this anime movie, because I was overwhelmed by the drama of Barefoot Gen as well. And yes, particularly the English voices on the air pilots, particularly in the movie Barefoot Gen as well, because yeah, that's particularly how you expect what is going on in that movie as well. Yeah, because I know this is particularly a long way before Grave of the Fireflies, but technically Grave of the Fireflies is more of a emotional type movie, unlike Barefoot Gen particularly as well. This is how it depicts of how you expect what is going on for. And although the manga did have controversy, where Barefoot Gen manga became restricted in elementary schools and junior high schools of Matsue City in Japan, after a claim was made that Barefoot Gen describes atrocities by Japanese groups that did not take place. Especially, this was reviewed after 44 out of 49 school principals polled in the city wanted the restriction removed. The curb was later lifted in August 2013 because of the whole controversy about the manga as well. Well, it's just kind of a long story, though, but you get the picture, though. I mean, although it got a DVD release by Ginion Entertainment back in 2005, and now it's gotten a Blu-ray release from, which is by Discotheque Media, which it has the original Japanese dub and the English dub from Ginion Entertainment as well. Well, yeah, that's the point, particularly. Well, you get the point, though, because The movie Barefoot Gen 2 is basically a 1986 anime sequel to the first one, which takes place 3 years after Hiroshima Nagasaki bombing during the final days of World War II as well. And yeah, this is a long way before Grave of the Fireflies, which ironically, Grave of the Fireflies is more of a 1967 semi-autobiographical short story of the same name by Akiyuki Nosaka as well. But Barefoot Gen is a lot more different than the other, particularly. Speaking of which, the English voices for the U.S. pilots in the movie Barefoot Gen were voiced by English voice actors, as well as the characters in Barefoot Gen were voiced by Japanese actors on there. But I noticed there's some of the actors on there that were from other anime, such as the Dragon Ball movie, which is Dragon Ball Mystic Adventure, and the Dr. Slump series as well, were appeared in this one. If you haven't seen an anime movie, give Barefoot Gen a watch. So that's going to be it for my anime review on Barefoot Gen for today's anime review. Thank you for watching, but before we go, here's my thoughts on this movie. When I first watched Barefoot Gen, I think I found it in Susan Napier's book, Anime from Akira to Howl's Moving Castle, because I didn't know that Barefoot Gen takes place in the setting of the final days of World War II, which is during the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing in Japan, which is back in 1945 as well, because I know it's basically the historical story as well. If you haven't seen an anime movie that takes place in the setting, give this movie a watch.